Okay, so today we'll be talking about the synovial joints. Now, first we have to talk about what bone is. And bone is pretty much a strong calcified connective tissue that makes up the skeletal system. Now, there's the articular cartilage, which is found between the synovial joints in the joint cavity, and it covers the articular surfaces to prevent contact between the joints. The synovial membrane is the layer of fibroblasts that line the joint cavity, and they secrete synovial fluid that kind of helps the bones from having any bone-to-bone friction. Now, next we'll be talking about the periosteum. Now, the periosteum surrounds the bone as a sheath, and it helps the bone attach to any surrounding tissues, along with tendons and ligaments. Now, the synovial joint is also known as a diarthrosis, which is a freely movable joint, and it has a wide range of motion than any other. Now, the kind of joints we're going to be talking today would be the hinge joint, gliding joint, pivot joint, condylar joint, saddle joint, and ball and socket joint. Now, the first one would be the hinge joint. Now, this joint, the articular surfaces are actually molded to each other, and which is why it only allows motion in one plane, such as just bending your knees or elbows. The next one would be the gliding joint. Now, these joints are flat or slightly curved, and it allows the bone to glide across one another. These are typically found between the metacarpals and the metatarsals. The next would be the pivot joint. Now, this joint only allows moving the articular surface in a rotation motion, which is why with the pivot joint we are allowed to move our head from side to side. Now, the condylar joint is also known as the ellipsoid joint, and it's known because of the elliptical cavity. Now, this kind of joint only allows movement into different kinds of planes. Now, the saddle joint. This joint is named simply because it looks like a rider sitting in a saddle. It has opposing surfaces, since one side it is concave while the other is convex, which creates a perfect fit. Since it is perfect fit, it allows an angular movement but prevents any rotations that can be found in our thumbs and such. Now, the next one would be the ball and socket joint. Now, this joint is pretty much what the name suggests, so it is a ball and a socket joint. It is a rounded shape that fits into a cup-shaped socket of the opposing bone, and it is multi-axial because of that here. Now, range of motion just refers to the amount of movement possible within a joint. The origin and the insertion. The origin is a part of the attachment that does not change position when the muscle contracts. On the other hand, insertion is where the part of the attachment that it is movable. Now, the class levers. There are three kinds of levers that could be found. There's the first, second, and third, and each lever contains three different kinds of parts to it. Now, there is the fulcrum, which is a rigid structure that works as a fixed point. There's the load, which is the opposing pressure that prevents any movement caused by the applied force, and then the applied force, which is a pressure by muscle contraction. Now, the first class lever can be compared to a seesaw, since the applied force and the load are on the opposite side of the fulcrum. The first class levers are somewhat rare in the body, and they can be found in the joint between the head and the first vertebrae. The load would be the head, the fulcrum would be the joint, and the muscular action would be the force, which are the muscles in the back of your skull. So here is an example. You can see the fulcrum, it's in the middle, force and load are to the opposite sides of each other. Now, the second class lever is more compared to a wheelbarrow, since the load is located between the applied force and the fulcrum. Now, this kind of lever could be found in something like a person standing on their tippy toes. The fulcrum would be located in the joints between the metatarsals and phalanges, and the resistance would be the weight of the body, and the force applied would be to the heel. Now, here you can see the example where a fulcrum is all the way to the left. There's the load and the force, and load is between the force and the fulcrum. Now, the third class lever, this lever is more commonly seen in the body, and they're completely opposite than the second class lever. Now, Then the third class lever, the force is between the load and the fulcrum. Now this one could be found in like your elbow joint. The fulcrum would be the elbow joint, the load would be the forearm, wrist, and hand, and the force would be the biceps muscles when the elbow is flexed. And you can see here the fulcrum force is between the load and the fulcrum.